Hello everybody, this is Joe with Carbon Marine. Today I'm going to give you a money saving hack on how you can get a 24-foot push pole without spending $1,000, $1,200, $1,500. Been doing this for years, haven't really talked about it in a video, but I think it's fair. I think it's time to let people know how the whole push pole space works and the much coveted 24-foot push pole. You know, it's tarpon season. It's April now, so the tarpon are going to be swimming. They're already swimming down in the Keys. But so you've got a pole. It's not long enough, and you want a longer push pole. But man, boy, they're so expensive, especially those 24-footers. They're really expensive. So I'm going to show you how you can take your 20, 21, or 22-foot push pole. I mean, you could probably do this with a 19 or a 20 if you've got a short pole that maybe it had an accident and the pole is shorter. But I'm going to show you a hack that we do all the time here to get you to a 24-foot push pole really inexpensively. Now here's how it goes. You've got a pole. I don't care what brand it is. Now there's a couple that are a little outside of the standard. The standard is 1.25 inches inside diameter. That's important to know because the ferrules, our ferrules, are the best. We're the only company that has a double wall thickness ferrule. All that means is the wall thickness of the ferrule is double that of what everybody else does, and it means that ferrule is not going to break. It's a much stiffer ferrule, doesn't flex as much, definitely doesn't break. So we advocate that you use a Carbon Marine heavy duty ferrule, which is a double wall thickness ferrule. Now, how do we get from 20 to 24 foot? Well, it's pretty easy. All your push poles are going to have a tip, right? This is a tip. So the way we go about converting a 20 or 21 foot, let's just say 21, that's the most common that I see here in the shop, is we're going to cut the tip off. You can see here, I've wrapped my electrical tape, I've made my cut. Now on the inside, we're just inside of the seal. We were the first guys to start doing this. It's funny now, I see everybody else is putting seals in their kids too, but yeah, we got onto that probably about 10 years ago, started putting seals in. And that's to isolate each compartment of the push pole from collecting any water if you were to have a fission or some sort of a void in the adhesive. But so when you cut your tip off, you're going to go 3 inches up from the collar. You're going to wrap your tape, you're going to cut it. So now you got your tip in your hand and you got the rest of your pole. You're going to look down the inside of the other side of the pole, the long side, make sure it's clear. There's not. Now, I'm going to give you one caveat that I probably should have mentioned earlier. You can't cut if there's a ferrule within 12 inches or 15 inches of the next ferrule because that whole system is going to get pressurized when you're sliding all that stuff together. It's going to be really hard to keep the sections together unless you've got a table with the clamps and springs and a way to keep them together. So usually you don't see a ferrule that close to the tip on typical push poles, but be aware, if there's already a ferrule there, you're going to have to call me for some unique advice that I'm not going to quite go into the details on here because it's such a rare instance. But so now you got 3 or 4, 5, 10, 15 foot of open tube. You've cut the tip off. You just look in that tube, make sure it's clear, clean. If it's got any water or mud, maybe the pole was leaking, clean all that stuff out. I use a hone on a drill. You may not have that. You can use a piece of wooden dowel, a piece of PVC pipe, and put some 60 or 80 grit paper, sandpaper, and get in there and rough all that up and clean it up good with alcohol, acetone. But now, here's where the money-saving tip is. When you do this sort of an extension, you're going to have a ferrule. We recommend the Carbon Marine Heavy Duty Ferrule Repair Kit. You're going to have the extension section. Now, some people come to me with really old push poles that are not made anymore. G. Loomis, Advantage. I think Rick Fordyce's dad had that company many years ago. Many years ago. And now the most common poles are MHX, Carbon Marine, Stiffy, Moonlighter. All of those with the exception of Stiffy and Biscayne carbons use 1.25 inch ferrule, so our ferrule would work. If it's an Extreme, the Stiffy Extreme, you got to use a Stiffy Extreme ferrule because it's a smaller diameter. If it's a Biscayne, you got to use a Biscayne ferrule. It's a bigger diameter. So for the sake of this demo, this video, we're going to talk about push poles that are based on 1.25 inch inside diameter, which would be our heavy duty ferrule. So you need the ferrule, you need the additional section. Now, most people, when they call me and want to add length to their push pole, they think that they have to buy a tip. And this is the money-saving tip, no pun intended. We can harvest this tip out. You don't have to buy another tip. We can take this tip off of this section. So the way we do that is you make your cut. This is a different tip, different piece. And I pulled the seal out so I could get down in there. And now you've got that tip with the carbon section in your hand. And if you'll notice, right here, I've sanded it. I've sanded a flat spot across the carbon. You have to do this. And you have to go all the way down to where you can see the shank of the nylon tip, because the way push-pull tubes, the way our push-pull tubes are made, half of the lamination schedule is wrapped around the mandrel on the inside. So it's wrapped like this. So the fibers are around. And that's what gives it hoop strength. That's what stops the tube from collapsing. If all the fibers ran this way, then as soon as you compress the tube, it would just collapse, like a plastic straw. So that's why you have to sand this all the way down to where you can see the shank of the tip, because you've got to cut those fibers. Now, I did this on a belt sander. You don't have to have a belt sander to do it. I've done it with a Dremel, with a little cutoff wheel, and you might have to go diagonally because of the radius of the cutoff wheel won't let you get down close to the collar here. But those are the two ways that I've done it most successfully. I prefer the belt sander. It's a cleaner, faster, easier way. I have one set up at the shop. Not everybody's got a belt sander, but you can do this with just regular sandpaper, rough, super aggressive, or a file, or a cutoff wheel, like a pneumatic cutoff wheel. But you just want to be careful you don't burn too much of the shank, or else you're going to open up a channel when you put the tip back in if it's a big cut. So now you've sanded the flat spot, you've cut through the hoop strength portion of the push-pull tubing. Now this is really, really, really important. I like putting it in a vise with a little cloth rag around it, just tighten it down, and then I take a screwdriver and I'll come into the top right here where the tube section and the shank meet. There's a little groove there, or a little transition. And so now pretend this is in the vise. I got my screwdriver in there, and I take my hammer and I whack it here, and it'll expand it and break the, you can see that, it'll break the epoxy loose from, I'm trying to get it where you can see the light. It'll break the epoxy loose from the tube, right? So you may have to go work your way around, go all the way around, 2 or 3 times, but that epoxy will shatter and it'll release, like cracking a walnut or cracking a peanut. Now, here's the scary part. Once you have that tube free, where you've broken the bond, it's still going to grab that shaft pretty well, because that shaft typically has grooves in it. You can see them here, 3 little grooves. So you can't just slide this off easily. What you have to do is expand it and then pull it off. Don't do that with your hands. Don't do that with your fingers. I did that the very first time. I heard it crack. I reached down in there excited. I pulled it. That thing opened up like a crab claw. And when I pulled it off, it clamped and closed on my thumb. And it's hard to see it. But these edges where you sanded it are like razor blades. They are wicked, wicked sharp. And that thing cut me so bad, I was bleeding like a stuck pig. So when you get to this stage where you're ready to pull the shell or the shank, the tubing off of the shank, use a pair of pliers, stretch it, and pull it off like that, and then you don't end up cutting yourself. Now you've got your tip. Just come in here with some 80 grit, 60 grit paper, sand it, get the excess epoxy off, dry fit it in the new tube, make sure it's not too tight. You always double, triple dry fit everything before you mix any of your epoxies. Really important. Otherwise, you get caught behind the clock and the epoxy locks up before you got your pole put together or partially put together. But that's how you can pull that old piece of tubing off and reuse your tube. So now, or reuse your tip. So now that tip goes back into the 3-foot extension that's got a ferrule on it. So when you put the whole thing together, you're adding 3 foot to your 21-foot pole. You use your tip back, and you just saved yourself about $50 because you didn't have to buy the tip. Yeah, They are that expensive. But you don't have to buy another tip. Now, if your tip's worn or you want to change your tip style, call us at Carbon Marine. We'll build that section, pre-bond the ferrule in it, pre-bond the new tip that you do want in it, and send you that whole assembly with the epoxy kit with everything you need. All you have to do is tape, cut off your tip, true up, sand and deburr the edge, put the epoxy, mix the epoxy, put the epoxy on the male after you've dry fitted everything, and put it together and bond it. And now you've got a 21 plus 3, you got a 24-foot push pole for today's prices, typically about $200, depending upon what tube you want. If you want a G3 tube, they're a little more expensive. If you want a G2 tube, they're a little less expensive. If you want a Magnum tube, they're a little less expensive. So somewhere in that 190 to 240 range, from memory, is what it takes to convert a G2, a Magnum, a G3LR, a Stiffy hybrid, a Stiffy Guide, Stiffy Graphite. We can extend all those. Now, some people say, well, are you putting Stiffy parts back on here? Well, if I have one, we repair all kinds of push poles, and sometimes we end up with pieces that I can match the exact tubing color and aesthetic. But at the end of the day, it's not that critical. You can have dissimilar aesthetics in the tubing if you're just putting the tip on. You're just adding an extension to the tip, because that's not rarely going to get seen anyway. It stays in the water. And we do that a lot. We extend a lot of Stiffy push poles with our G2 tubes or our G3 tubes to get them to 24 foot. So that's the money-saving hack today on how to get a 24-foot pole out of an older, used 20 or 21-foot pole. Call Carbon Marine, 813-284-7040. I'm Joe. You can ask for me. You can ask for my son, Joseph. You can go to our website, carbonmarine.com. But we do this all the time, especially during tarpon season. A lot of guides in the Keys, they'll come buy a new pole every year. They'll get a new 24. They might have an old 24 that was broken down to a 21 or a 20, and I'll collect them in my first run down to the Keys. I'll bring them back, and I'll refurbish them. I'll put a new tip on, I'll put a new foot on them, I'll add extensions, I'll re-clear them. There's a whole variety of push pole related services that we offer, but the money-saving hack of the day to get to a 24-foot push pole, add an extension, harvesting your tip off of an older 21 or 20. This is Joe at Carbon Marine. I hope this has been a helpful tip for you. Feel free to call us anytime. You can visit carbonmarine.com, or you can call us at 813-284-7040. Go out there and catch you a tarpon.